conditions starting to look a lot like fall across the U.S. And checking out the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, we are devoid of tropical cyclone activity. There's how it looks from the polar orbiter satellites. If we go back 1 year to 2023, also very quiet across that same area. This looks like Hurricane Nigel lifting northward. If we go back to 2022, Hurricane Fiona moving past Puerto Rico. 2021, also rather quiet. This may be Tropical Storm Peter. And we go back to 2020, which of course was a rather significant year. This looks like Hurricane Teddy out there in the Atlantic, Hurricane Sally dissipating on the East Coast, Tropical Storm Beta in the Gulf, Tropical Storm Wilfred near the Cape Verde Islands, and of course in 2020 we made it all the way to Gamma, Delta, Epsilon, Zeta, Eta, Theta, Iota. That was a truly ridiculous year. And we are looking at some major tropical developments coming up for next week. We'll cover that shortly. Let's take a look at weather around the country this afternoon. In the eastern part of the U.S., it is very much like late summer, early fall. Temperatures in the 80s, a few 90s, and we've got this little stationary front through northern Florida. Some thunderstorms developing just north of that. As we go west, we've got a very active frontal system. If you look at those thickness lines right there, those dash red lines, they are kind of bunched up in this area right there. That represents a thermal gradient, and that's helping to support this frontal zone, currently moving into the high plains with an active dry line from western Kansas into the Texas Big Bend. As we go further west, we've got yet another shot of cold air coming down the California coast, driving this weak frontal system through California. And further to the northwest, we can see some definite evidence of a strong upper-level low. Let's head on up into Alaska. Stormy once again in the Gulf of Alaska. We've got mostly marine warnings in effect, small craft advisories all through southeastern Alaska, and we pick up gale warnings around Kodiak Island. In the Alaskan interior, temperatures starting to drop a little bit, seeing widespread 40s. So we are making that transition into fall, and we're going to start seeing those 30s and 20s start to appear on the weather map in the coming weeks. Temperatures in northern Canada look pretty much the way we've seen it over the past few weeks, 30s and 40s. Although if you go up to Elamir Island, way up here at the top, we are seeing 21 at Eureka, 28 at this new station. I'm not familiar with that one. That's north of Grise Fjord, which is 32. That's the most northern Canadian settlement right there. Going into Canada itself, we pick up that active weather system there in Montana, a very wound up upper level low. We'll talk about that as we go through the region by region. Let's start out with the northeastern U.S., where we have a large anticyclone covering that area. Well, high pressure does not always mean clear skies. This is a classic example. You remember the surface map showing that area of high pressure across Maine, New York, Ontario. Well, we've got this area of mid and upper level clouds spreading over that. This is a mixture of altocumulus, cirrus, and maybe some nimbostratus as you go further to the south, mixed with convective elements. The METAR plots at 6 p.m. Eastern showing that ridging and high pressure across Nova Scotia into Ontario and Quebec. If we look at the individual plots, Syracuse, 14,000 broken, 18,000 overcast, that's going to be altocumulus and cirrus. As we go further south into New York City, we pick up the lower cloud layers, 5,000, 2,500, and it gets worse as you go into Virginia. This is the remnants of that old potential tropical cyclone, that tropical depression, that kind of migrated up the southeastern coast earlier this week, currently centered somewhere in far eastern North Carolina right there. You can see the diminished pressure values down to about 29.84 at that station right there. That's going to be Stumpy Point. So the Great Stumpy Point system of September 18th, 2024. So we check that out on the visible satellite loop. The center of the circulation right there And we see sort of a comma structure right there that we normally see with frontal systems. This area right here that's associated with the warm advection. And we've got the cold conveyor belt on the backside. That's not going to be really too much of a factor right now. In fact, it is dominated by convective weather, especially right there in Virginia. We've got some strongly sheared anvils. Let's take a closer look at that. There they are, very impressive anvils across much of southern Virginia at this hour. And there it is on the radar, little MCV right there. It's going to be just west of Norfolk. See that little spiral appearance right there, and it appears to drift to the east. Here's the 500 millibar chart, about 18,000 feet. We see a pocket of colder temperatures right there, minus 10 at 500 millibars. So that's providing steep lapse rates across much of Virginia this afternoon. You get the addition of surface heating across the Carolinas into southern Virginia, and the result is thunderstorms. We take a look at the southeastern U.S., and we do see some evidence of that upper level low. Looks like the center of the circulation is over northwestern South Carolina, and we get that spiral appearance in the upper level cloud field. That vortex center will correspond to the cold pocket, which is actually displaced a little bit further to the north. Looking across Florida, we've got that stationary front through the northern part of the state, producing some showers and storms there. As we go further south, we have heat advisories once again for southeastern Florida, Homestead, Miami, Fort Lauderdale. Heat indexes up to 107, but it is being broken up by some of this thunderstorm activity this evening. In the southern plains, we've got dry line storms going up from about Dodge City down to Pampa. None of them really becoming dominant at this hour. Further to the east, we can see the warm conveyor belt bringing up moisture from the Gulf, although some of it on the eastern periphery is recirculated. A little bit of mixed Canadian air coming in from the southern states, but the richer, deeper moisture focused on the I-35 corridor. It does look like the moisture does taper off as you go further to the west, not showing as much of a cloud field out around Midland. In the northern plains, a very dynamic weather pattern. We do have an SPC slight risk for severe weather. That covers an area from about Sioux City up to just south of Fargo. The main risk there is going to be wind and hail with a very low risk of tornadoes. We can see that that is associated with the nose of the warm conveyor belt as it flows to the north. And as we go further to the northwest, a very impressive weather system moving through Montana and North Dakota. A very prominent dry slot all the way into southern Saskatchewan, with the feed of moisture wrapping well to the west and into the back of the system. There's a quick look at it on the 500 millibar heights and vorticity chart. The vortex located in northeastern Montana, and we can see a few shortwave lobes wrapping around the southeastern periphery. Some of that may be associated with the development of convection out there in Minnesota and South Dakota. There's a look at the moisture field on the high-resolution rapid refresh, looking at theta E here. That's going to be the theta E axis across eastern South Dakota up to eastern North Dakota. And the forecast for the development of convection pretty much runs like this. Cold core convection up to the northwest, and then closer to the warm conveyor belt, we see some storms start to get going around Sioux Falls, and just very scattered development through this evening. So certainly some negative factors, and then more of a forced initiation, possibly along that warm front towards 5 in the morning, spreading eastward into southern Minnesota. Heading into the southwestern U.S., clear skies. The water vapor imagery showing quite a bit of dry air as well. That will allow for strong radiational cooling across the San Luis Valley. Around Alamosa, Crestone, temperatures will be dropping to 32. So they do have frost advisories in effect. As we go further to the west, here is part 2 of our 1-2 punch. This shows a large upper-level vortex off the California coast. This appears to be well offshore. The latest GFS run was taking it on a track somewhat like this, and I do kind of wonder if that's going to continue shifting southward or not. In any case, a very strong southern track for this time of year. The visible imagery showing a little bit of elevated cold core convection, but as this moves inland and interacts with the strong surface heating, we do have the potential to see some strong cold core convection somewhere around central or southern California going into Thursday or Friday. So the very latest graphics I have, they do bring this cold core low right there around San Luis Obispo and into the Los Angeles area for early Friday. Then it tracks on into the area around Needles, maybe just south of there towards Lake Havasu City, and out towards Phoenix, and then it rapidly gets picked up over the weekend. But the very, very latest data is the 18Z GFS. That's at Pivotal Weather. Let's take a look at what that does. We go into tomorrow, and we see the low dropping through San Luis Obispo. This is the first time I've seen this product. The 18Z run, yeah, that tracks right across Los Angeles, Friday morning, crossing into the deserts, and then on into Arizona for Saturday. So what's going to happen at peak heating on Thursday? Well, the low is going to be moving onshore into the coastal range, so we could see some potent cold core convection across the mountains there. And then we go into Friday, we get the addition of afternoon heating once again. Could see some strong thunderstorms and showers in southern Nevada and parts of the Mojave Desert. And in the northwestern U.S., this area mostly being affected by the wraparound into western Montana. We had winter storm warnings expire just north of Yellowstone National Park in the Gallatin and Custer forests. There were snows above 9,000 feet. Fisher Creek reported 8 inches today. The National Hurricane Center products, very quiet for this time of year. We've got this one area with a 20% chance of formation in the next 48 hours. But things are going to start getting active over the next several days, especially right here in the northwestern Caribbean. We're looking at a possibility of a tropical cyclone in the Gulf for midweek next week. And I'll let you take a look at it right here on the integrated vapor transport chart. This is not really a product for tropical weather. This is something we use for atmospheric rivers in the mid-latitudes, but I find it useful for getting visual cues on where important weather is going on. For example, right here, we can see a pretty stout flow in the trade winds, and sometimes those curl up and you can see the actual easterly waves. Not really much of that going on right now, but as we go into the weekend, we see things start to become a little bit more active right in this area here. This is an area of possible development going into Monday, and you can really see this come together on the GFS, developing into what looks like a tropical storm and possibly a hurricane as we go into Thursday and Friday. Currently, the model's taken that into western or central Florida, somewhere between Tampa and Pensacola. The European model was taking that further to the west into southeast Texas and Louisiana, but it was much weaker. The Canadian model splitting the difference, taking that more towards Gulfport. So what's important here is all three models were showing the potential for something happening in the Gulf. There is still a lot of disagreement, but we will have to keep a close eye on next Thursday and Friday. So let's go ahead and take a look at the forecast, starting with tonight. Now, this is the GFS output, and I've manually drawn the fronts on so you can track where they're going and see what the air masses are up to. We go into 1 a.m., 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, and then into the afternoon. You can see this system right here in California pushing cold air eastward. It will be a very cold start. In the Los Angeles area, we could see lots of 50s, looking at 58 downtown in Los Angeles, 57 at Riverside, Orange County 62, and Big Bear in the lower 30s. So Ron Chalfant out there probably having to pull some blankets out of the closet. As things heat up on Thursday, could see some cold core storms start to generate out there around the mountains of Los Angeles up into the coastal range. Further to the east, the Storm Prediction Center has a slight risk of severe thunderstorms all across eastern Minnesota, western Wisconsin, pretty much ahead of this cold front. Minneapolis, La Crosse, northeastern Iowa, they could all see some potential for severe weather. The main risk there wind and hail, but there could be a few tornadoes throughout the I-35 corridor eastward. Further to the west, the high plains becomes dry slotted, but we could see a continuation of cold core convection in North Dakota. Further south, warm air flowing northward, some downslope in the higher terrain. We could see temperatures up near 100 west of I-35, Childress expecting 100, Wichita Falls 100, and 101 at Enid, Oklahoma, located right there. There's the weather map for later on Friday. Frontal showers and storms all through the Great Lakes right there. Looking at more heat for the southern plains. 98 degrees at DFW, 98 at Oklahoma City, and out to the west, cold core convection popping out in the deserts right there around Las Vegas, down into the northeastern Mojave Desert. Of course, the better dynamics are going to be found further to the east ahead of this frontal system. And let me just go ahead and show you the Q vectors. That'll give you an idea how the vertical motion field is progressing. For this evening, most of the stronger dynamic lift in the central California area, going into the overnight hours and into tomorrow, a lot of the stronger dynamic lift spreading into the Mojave Desert and into Southern California, with the cold core convection developing later during the afternoon further to the west. As we go into the overnight hours and into Friday, the stronger dynamic lift spreading into Arizona. Take that rapidly into Saturday. You can see it starting to move very quickly to the east as that wave opens up. The stronger lift by Saturday will be on the high plains of Colorado and New Mexico, and then moving into the Midwest area for Sunday and Monday. So we pick this up on Friday evening. There comes some Canadian air coming south, some Pacific air coming in from the west-southwest, and this will all fuse together with a strong frontal system going into the weekend. So there it is. Later on Saturday, a deep surface low in southeastern Colorado, strong dynamics coming together, and you can pretty much presume that the upper level jet is running like that. Much cooler in Denver on Saturday, looking for a high of 70 compared to 87 the previous day, widespread 70s into Nebraska. And with all this rapid changeable weather, the enhanced prevailing westerlies, that is going to shut down the monsoon in Arizona, possibly for the season. So we will see about that. Anyway, going into Sunday, things start progressing to the east into the lower plains. Remember, the strongest Q vector convergence was out in this region right here. That's going to mark the location of stronger dynamic support, and that's going to be along the nose of that warm conveyor belt. So probably some very active weather around Omaha, Des Moines, and Kansas City. Further to the south, cold air begins filtering down into the panhandles, looking for highs in the 70s and 80s down there. Areas from Midland to Tulsa southward will remain in the 90s. Further to the east, a rainy day throughout the Corn Belt into the Midwest. And in the southwestern U.S., well, we start cranking up the heat once again. 100s for Phoenix, Yuma, and Needles. And we go on into Monday. Our system lifts to the northeast. Not much development to the south, just this little tail end across Oklahoma, kind of a little stable wave right there, but still producing a few showers along the edge of that warm conveyor belt. Shortwave dropping through the Rockies Monday. You can see that unsettled pattern right there. That will possibly shear out into a cutoff low in the Texas Big Bend for early next week. Temperatures continue in the 80s and 90s in Texas, and the heat gets worse in the southwestern U.S. up to 104 at Phoenix for Monday. And I'll take you quickly through the rest of the week. This system right here continues moving into the Great Lakes and into Ontario and Quebec. The tail end of the front does remain pretty active convectively from St. Louis to Little Rock, Dallas, and Midland for Tuesday and Wednesday, so it could be a wet period for next week. And then you can see down to the south, here comes trouble. The GFS taking that into the Florida Panhandle, on up into Georgia, the remnants of a hurricane or tropical storm, and that will move up the East Coast going into Friday and Saturday. Anyway, that's currently the way it looks on the GFS, and it is certainly subject to change. Okay, we need to go ahead and get this wrapped up. It's already 19 minutes in, and I know some of you are waiting on this program. I want to thank our newest Patreon supporters, Keith, Joe Mullen, Austin Fennell, and Mike Wan. Thank you very much for that support. And remember, if you go to Patreon and get signed up, you will get those Monday videos. Those are private videos similar to this one, 15 to 20 minutes. But as a Patreon supporter, you will get that program on Monday. All right, hope you all have a great rest of your Wednesday, and we'll see you back here on Friday, and we'll take a look at that hurricane for next week and see what that's doing, or see if that's been removed from the charts. Anyway, it will be interesting. Okay, we'll see you soon. Take care and have a good one. Bye-bye.